Right now, as I sit wrapped in layers, clutching a mug of something hot and pretending my heating bill doesn't exist, I can't help but wonder, how did anyone survive winter in the Middle Ages? No blankets humming with electricity, no steaming hot showers, no comfort food or glowing screens to distract from the cold. Just endless frost and the howl of the wind. Imagine it. The year is 1348. The rivers are frozen solid, roofs are caving under snow, and every breath turns to mist before your eyes. The people of that time didn't just face discomfort, they faced death. Food stores dwindled, fires ran out of fuel, and the week didn't last until spring. This was the era of the Little Ice Age, a centuries-long chill that turned even mild winters into nightmares. So the question is, if you were dropped into that frozen world with nothing but your modern instincts, could you survive a single medieval winter? And while you think about that, tell me, where are you watching from and what's the weather like there right now? Most peasant homes in Europe offered almost no protection from the cold. They were crudely built, poorly insulated, and riddled with drafts. Made from timber, wattle, and daub, these structures often stood atop raised mounds of earth, a primitive attempt at insulation. At the center of every home was the fire, a sacred and essential heart that provided both warmth and a place to cook. Instead of chimneys, most houses had simple ventilation holes in the roof, enough to let the smoke out, but not the precious heat. Unfortunately, that meant the air inside was thick with soot. By the end of winter, most peasants reeked of wood smoke, and their walls were blackened with grime. If the home was slightly larger, a ladder might lead to a small upper floor used for storage, while downstairs everything revolved around the hearth, the cooking area, the eating table, and often a space to shelter livestock during the bitterest nights. The Vikings of Scandinavia mastered this in their longhouses. They built long, narrow hearths lined with stones that absorbed and slowly released heat throughout the day. During the frigid months, cows, pigs, and chickens were brought indoors, not only for food and materials, but for the body heat they produced. Yes, it was crowded, noisy, and smelled like a barnyard, but at least you didn't freeze. If you were lucky, you might find yourself spooning a pig beside a roaring fire, imagining some medieval version of romance, perhaps with a jug of ale and a half-decent tune played on a lute. Many homes used portable braziers, small, open coal burners, but safety was always a gamble. One wrong move, and your cozy cottage became a blazing torch. Stone buildings, though sturdier, were often even colder, and glass windows were a luxury reserved for the rich. By the 1230s, parts of London's Palace of Westminster were glazed, so that the chambers might not be so windy. As one record puts it, it didn't make things warm, but at least it kept the icy drafts at bay. Elsewhere, like in southern France, cathedral windows were sometimes sealed with plaster during winter months. The poor had to make do with crude fixes, stuffing holes with straw, paper, or foliage just to slow the cold's invasion. When it came to clothing, layering was life. The best defense was a mix of insulation and radiation, staying close to a heat source while trapping warmth with thick garments. People wore linen undergarments beneath itchy but heavy wool. The linen acted as a soft barrier against the coarse fabric and was far easier to wash. In the coldest months, even indoors, peasants bundled themselves in outdoor wear: boots, woolen gloves, scarves, and thick cloaks. Between the smoke, sweat, and farm animals, the smell inside these homes must have been enough to make your eyes water. Priests, too, had their tricks. During long sermons in freezing churches, their fingers could go numb, and the horror of dropping the Blessed Sacrament during Mass was unthinkable. So, they used elegant metal hand warmers, hinged, perforated bowls filled with hot charcoal that radiated just enough heat to keep their hands alive without burning them. Others heated bricks or stones in the fire, then wrapped them in cloth and carried them to bed, the medieval equivalent of a hot water bottle. For those with wealth, fur was the ultimate luxury. The rich lined their cloaks with fox, mink, or sable, while the poorer classes used rabbit or lambskin whenever they could get away with it. Of course, you needed your lord's permission to trap game, and the sumptuary laws of 1363 made it illegal for anyone but the wives and daughters of landowning peasants or craftsmen to wear fur from foxes, rabbits, or even cats. And the cold wasn't limited to the far north. Even southern Europe was not spared from the wrath of those winters. Between 1363 and 1364, much of the continent was locked beneath ice. Rivers froze solid. In Germany, the Rhine was frozen for 70 straight days. The people of Cologne even held a market atop the frozen river, while towns like Vassal in Belgium lay buried under snow for more than 3 months. Further south, things weren't much better. The Venetian lagoon froze, as did the Atlantic coast near Bordeaux, and even the estuary of the Rhone turned to solid ice. In 1352, snow blanketed the hills of Florence for over a month, and by 1359, chroniclers wrote that snow had risen across central Italy to an extraordinary height, so that men were forced to lighten the roofs. The medieval winter wasn't just a test of endurance, it was a fight against nature itself. And while we complain today about our heaters taking too long to warm up, it's humbling to remember that, centuries ago, survival meant huddling in smoke-filled huts, wrapped in wool, pressed against livestock, praying that spring would come before your strength ran out. The snow that year came down with such force that it buried entire towns beneath thick, white silence. Streets vanished, roofs collapsed, and in many places, people found themselves trapped inside their homes for days on end. In Bologna, drifts rose as high as 18 feet, and in Medina, they climbed even higher, a frozen wall sealing life away from the world. The winter of 1389 was remembered across Europe, especially in the Laser region of southern France, where the snow fell in great, suffocating sheets. A chronicler from Montpellier wrote, "These snowfalls were so immense that they destroyed many farmsteads. People perished beneath the weight of their own homes, others froze to death, and some starved, for the stores of food had all but vanished." Such conditions might have been normal for the distant north, lands where cold was an old companion. In Scandinavia, the Vikings glided through the snow on skis built for hunting and travel. But further south, people were far less prepared. Here, peasants trudged through the frost with thick boots or rode sleds pulled by horses, travel that could cease entirely when the storms began. For those living in the isolated mountain regions like Lozère, survival through these winters was not guaranteed. Life in farming communities never stopped, not even in the coldest months. Every season demanded work, and every mistake could mean death before spring. Surviving a medieval winter required months of preparation. Firewood was gathered from early spring through the end of summer, bundled, stacked, and stored to last through the bitter nights. The autumn harvest marked the final chance to prepare for the dark season. Everything edible had to be preserved somehow, pickled, smoked, dried, or salted. Grains and pulses were carefully stored in clay jars, ready to be turned into thick stews or coarse bread when the snow came. Fresh fruit vanished quickly, so berries and apples were air-dried or soaked in vinegar to last longer. Goats, cows, and chickens offered milk and eggs, lifelines of nourishment when fresh crops could no longer be found. Butter, cheese, and curdled milk became essential staples. In Scandinavia, people devoured a sour milk cheese called skyr in vast quantities. Even the leftover whey, a byproduct of cheesemaking, was not wasted. Stored in enormous barrels, it became a base for pickling or preserving meat. A single cask could hold 30 liters of whey and enough cured meat to feed a family for weeks. Most villages were built close to a stream, well, or river, ensuring access to fresh water, though in the worst weather even that could freeze. When storms sealed them indoors, people melted snow to survive. Yet, even the best preparation couldn't stop famine when the earth itself failed. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 was one such calamity. Endless rain drowned the fields, rotted the grain, and killed the livestock. Harvests fell by a third, and across Europe, hunger began to devour entire regions. Desperation soon followed, theft, infanticide, and even cannibalism. By the time the rains finally ceased, millions had perished. Some estimate as many as 30 million were affected, with nearly 3 million dead. Though the Black Death would strike harder a few decades later, the Great Famine was the late Middle Ages' cruelest natural disaster. And still, life went on. When the chores were done and the fires were stoked, people needed something to keep their minds from breaking in the endless cold. There was little farm work to do, so villagers turned to whatever joy they could find. Children and adults alike played in the snow, building icy battlegrounds for sledding and snowball fights. In Viking lands, children trained their aim and reflexes through these playful skirmishes, early lessons for future warriors. Old manuscripts, like the Book of Hours owned by the Duchess of Burgundy in 1460, depict families hurling snowballs, laughing together in fleeting moments of warmth. Indoors, people passed the time spinning wool, telling stories or playing games. Chess and backgammon filled the long nights, while dice and strategy games entertained Vikings in their mead halls. Even hunts became sport, the boar hunts of winter combining necessity with challenge. One of the most widely read texts of the medieval world, the Secretum Secretorum, or the Secret of Secrets, claimed to hold the wisdom of kings, physicians, and philosophers. Among its many lessons was a peculiar one: how to endure the merciless chill of winter. It warned that winter was ruled by phlegm, the cold humor, and survival depended on maintaining balance. The cure? A disciplined diet, warm meats like mutton, game, or pigeon, paired with rich red wine. But beware of excess. Bloodletting, fornication, and purgatives were strictly forbidden. Still, the book allowed one small mercy: to eat a little more in winter, for the cold, it said, draws the fire of the body inward. A convenient truth for those about to feast through Christmas. For the people of southern Europe, where the sun baked the land most of the year, the arrival of winter felt like nature's vengeance, a chilling reminder of life's fragility. But farther north, in lands of frozen rivers and whispering pines, winter was no stranger. They wore fur-lined cloaks, walked on wooden skis, and carried the stoic acceptance that cold was not an enemy to fight, but a burden to endure. Still, the true terror of winter lay not in the snow, but in what it stole. Food dwindled, firewood ran low, cattle starved in their stalls. The sick grew weaker in crowded homes where disease spread like breath on glass. Many didn't see the spring thaw. Winter was more than a season, it was a trial, a test of preparation, of endurance, of faith. And even for those who survived, it left its mark. A quiet reminder that, in the medieval world, comfort was a luxury, and survival itself was a kind of victory. If this glimpse into the cold realities of the past stirred something in you, imagine what else still waits beneath the frost of forgotten centuries. Join us as we uncover more truths history left buried in ice and silence. Like, share, and subscribe to Vassal Truths, where the past breathes again, and every story reminds us just how fragile survival has always been.